So we are looking at cranial nerves. Before we start looking at the muscles of the head, before we start looking the different structures of the head and the neck, I feel it is very important for us to understand the nerves that are going to be able to supply the contents of the head and neck. These are basically the cranial nerves. Because if we say the blood supply, say of the nose is this nerve, it will be not meaningful because you don't really understand how that nerves comes about. So you're actually supposed to understand the cause of all the nerves, the cranial nerves. In my practical theory test for head and neck, you just take 1 month before you can write that. They brought the entire cranial nerve number 7, laboring like 27 things. So you need to understand these nerves. So for the olfactory nerve, you want to understand the olfactory pathway, some clinical significance, and then we'll do some questions. Cranial nerve number 1, which is the olfactory nerve, is the first and is the shortest cranial nerve. You have got some of these nerves transmit what we call special sensations. Special senses includes olfaction, that's smell, gustatory, that's taste, and then you have got hearing, you have got balance. Okay, which one have I not even mentioned? So smell, taste, hearing, balance. The seventh one that I've not mentioned, hope I'll remember it. So these guys are transmitted by some, and also sight, vision. So these are special senses. They are transmitted by their own nerves. The first nerve is a carries special sensation of smell. When you look at these cranial nerves, they emerge from the brain. Cranial nerve number 1 and number 2 emerge from the telencephalon, which is the forebrain or the cerebrum, and then 3 and 4 will now emerge down. They'll start coming from the brain stem. Okay, so from the brain stem, you have got first there, you are going to have the pons, you have got the midbrain. So first have the midbrain, and then you're going to have the pons. You have got the the medulla oblongata. So this is how they are going to move. So the first two will come from the cerebellum, from the cerebrum. The next two cranial nerves are going to come from the pons. The next four from the midbrain. The last four will come from the medulla oblongata. In elderly people, they have got less sensation of smell because these nerves end up reducing in number as one gets to grow. Now, the pathway for olfaction has got olfactory nerve is made up of multiple nerve fibers. Okay, there are a lot. So I've got first what we call the olfactory receptor cell. A lot of these coming together form up the olfactory nerve. And then you are going to have the olfactory bulb and then the tract. Now, tract is a collection of nerves in the axons in the central nervous system. So in the central nervous system, you not hear anything of nerve, you'll be hearing tract. Just like we don't hear of ganglia in the central nervous system, you're going to hear of nucleus. Okay. So from the olfactory tract, you're now going to have the olfactory stria and then the olfactory cortex. That is now part of the brain that will be able to interpret these olfaction sensations. Actually, the olfactory pathway, this is the only special sense that does not pass through the thalamus. You see that all the ascending pathways, the pathways that come from different organs going to the brain, they pass through the thalamus. It's only the olfactory pathway. Now, this description is actually more of the neuroscience because what you discover is that you are going to, the way I'm teaching you this, it means that your neuroscience part is already covered. You do cranial nerves in, you are going to do them in neuroanatomy. You also do them in neurophysiology. There is a question? Yes, please. Okay. Okay, let me hear from others. Are you able to get me or is still breaking also for you? Okay, thank you. So, Raquel, it should be on network there. So, what I'm saying is that what we are describing now, you do this, you do special senses in physiology, the neurophysiology. So, I'll just come in and add on only a little things in neurophysiology because you already know the pathway. We also do in neuroanatomy, but this is head and neck. This is the goodness of neurosciences. Okay. Now about this is purely neuroscience about you understanding first order neuron and these other things. Yeah. But what I want to take note of is that for you to form these nerves, first you have got the olfactory epithelium on in the upper part of the nose. We call it the roof of the nasal cavity. This part. Can you see you have got these a lot of receptors here. So these call them olfactory receptor cells, and and we call these as the first order neurons. They are the first neurons that will be able to pick up sensations about smell. And then these nerves are going to go and synapse with second order neurons. And here the main cells are what we call the mitral cells for the second order neurons. The point where these guys are synapsing, we call it the glomerulus. This is the point here. Okay? We have got about 12 to 20 fibers from the olfactory nerve fibers or those receptor cells. And these guys actually penetrate. You have got this bone here on top on the roof of the nasal cavity. We call it the ethmoid bone. It has got openings. This part of the bone is known as a cribriform plate. We talked about it when we were discussing the bones of the head and neck. And actually, when you go in parasitology, we also discussed Naegleria fowleri. This is the nerve that it will take advantage of. When you are swimming in the water, what happens is that Naegleria fowleri can also enter via the water and then pass through this cranial nerve number one, pass through the cribriform plate, and then go and infect the brain. Okay, make sure you revise that already. We covered it. So you can see you are starting with an olfactory nerve cells, and then they are synapsing with the mitral cells, which are the second order neurons. Second order just means that they are the second neurons that are being given the information. This is the olfactory bulb here. Okay, it's actually just down the olfactory lobe of the brain, because at this point we are going to have actually the frontal lobe. This point we are going to have the frontal lobe of the brain, the cerebrum. And then this same olfactory, from the olfactory bulb, we are going to have the tract, collection of axons in the central nervous system. This olfactory tract, what happens that it is going to be divided into two roots at the anterior perforated substance. Now you can't identify that here. We'll discuss that in neuroscience. So we're going to form the posterior and the anterior roots. Okay, and actually these guys not anterior and posterior, but the medial and lateral. And the way you are forming this is that they are going to form some of them posterior and then some anterior to the optic chiasm. Optic chiasm, you understand this when we come to cranial nerve number 2, because cranial nerve number 2 that carries sensations to the eyes, when they form a nerve which we call the optic nerve, from your left eye and from your right eye, they are going to come and join on what we call the optic chiasm. It's a very important landmark in anatomy. So on that optic chiasm, that's where cranial nerve number 1 will be able to split into the medial olfactory stria and the lateral olfactory stria. Medial and lateral is just telling you of the orientation of the nerve. Really nothing any special there, right? When you are looking at the brain from the bottom, think of it, you've gotten the brain from my body, and then you are looking from down, looking upwards. This is what you'll be able to see. This is the frontal lobe of the brain, this one. And can you see this is the cranial nerve number 1? This is the olfactory bulb. We've removed the olfactory receptor cells that's supposed to be in the nose here. And then as it goes, I've got the olfactory tract that is going to now split into the medial olfactory stria and the lateral olfactory stria. And then you also have the intermediate olfactory stria here. Okay. It's at this point which we are calling as the anterior perforated substance where the splitting is happening. The medial root, now this is more of the neuroscience, and instead of head and neck, anyway, it's your course. The medial root is going to cross the midline, moving from the one side of the body to the other side through the anterior commissure. At this point, you don't even understand what the anterior commissure is, but commissures, these are just connections of the brain. Some parts of the brain, the left part of the brain can be connected to the right part of the brain. Some parts of the left side of the brain are also connected to each other. So we call those as commissures. It connects the two cerebral hemispheres, the anterior commissure, to connect the left cerebral hemisphere with the right. Now the lateral root, which is the lateral stria, this one carries olfactory fibers to end in cortex of the anchors. So I've got this structure which is known as the anchors. We'll discuss it in neuroanatomy in what we call the limbic system. So this anchors is actually important for smell. So the fibers that are coming from the lateral stria will go to the anchors and also to the hippocampal gyrus. Hippocampus is also part of the limbic system. Hippocampus controls emotions. Why do you feel like crying when you see sausage? Because you feel nice, right? So emotions are attached to smell. When you smell something you love, you start feeling emotions, right? Some of you, if you just get a certain perfume, you start feeling nice because it's the perfume of someone that you like or something. And then we have got the olfactory cortex. Again, this is head and neck. This is not head and neck. This is neuroscience, right? When information from the nerve, the olfactory nerve, reaches your brain, there is a specific part of the brain where that information is supposed to be interpreted. First, you are going to smell for you to pick up that smell, and then how are you going to interpret the type of smell that you are smelling? Why is it you can tell, okay, this is foul smelling, this is, let's say, sweet smelling. So to really interpret the type of smell, you are now going to have some other areas where or primary olfactory cortex. The primary olfactory cortex is a region of the brain that is responsible for you really being able to smell. Okay. But now for you to make other interpretations, that area is going to connect to other areas of the brain. For example, the piriform cortex, amygdala, olfactory tubercle, and secondary olfactory cortex. These guys are involved in memory and appreciation of olfactory sensation. Why is it that you can remember a certain type of smell? A- Anosmia is a condition where you cannot smell. Okay, probably because there's a distraction to the nerves. Dysosmia is a condition where there is a distortion in the quality of smell, probably because of the damage to the nerve. If, for example, if you have got an upper respiratory tract infection, in microbiology, specifically virology, we'll talk about these. Most of the things that cause microorganisms that cause upper respiratory tract infections are viruses. That is a quick but simple overview on cranial nerve number one, but there's something that I've not talked about here. I want you to do just a simple search, a very simple one. Just find out what are the nuclei of cranial nerve number one. Okay, collection of cell, collection of cell bodies for cranial nerve number one. Simple research. Which root of second neuron joins the opposite side? Lateral root, upper root, middle root, lower root. The questions I've put there are for neuroscience, not head and neck. Olfactory nerve, I want you to understand it so that you can just appreciate about the smell. But for the head and neck, what we are more interested in, the cranial nerves we're more interested in are those cranial nerves that are going to supply the muscles of the head and neck. Okay, for example, cranial nerve number 5 and number 7, and also very much the cranial nerve number 9, number 10, though the number 10 will be, that's a vagus, will be supplying most of the abdominal organs, but we'll still discuss it. So we still have to understand all of them. Don't forget to search the nuclei of these cranial nerves. Cranial nerve number one only for today. Just search what are the nuclei of cranial nerve number one and where are they located. Simple research.